Okay. So now we're recording the volunteer session. We had a quick conversation about context. And we also worked out that there are some people who are on the call who haven't used the app before and are sort of vetting it out a little bit. Kalman, you'd already posted in the chat, and I think this is key and crucial, and I may swap my screen to it. As we're talking about the Volunteers for Salesforce app, David Habib at the foundation who wrote it also has a website with a lot of resources. I know people here like the frequently asked questions, but also his documentation. I have to say it's one of the most well-documented apps out there, I think. Anybody on the panel just want to comment on that whole business of the documentation and what David's provided?
Well, I would agree with that, and I've always been amazed with this app because David did it totally as a volunteer developing it and has continued to, add things to it and support it strictly on a volunteer basis, which I think is amazing and a testament to the power of volunteers.
Yeah, I think it's funny because people who are doing the consulting, sometimes you look at the documentation and you talk to your clients and they're like, well, why can't I just implement this? And the truth is people could implement it. However, still with any application, you have to have a strong Salesforce background. You have to understand the object model and, security, things like that. But he does an amazing job of walking you through literally the steps, not even just the order of turning on and implementing the application, but a lot of troubleshooting and modifying CSS, things like that, embedding in your website, things that applications generally would not necessarily go into in an overall setup guide.
And Carrie is asking, what is the app? So just quickly, if you are a nonprofit starter pack 3 user, that is, if you've signed up and you use the nonprofit starter pack and you've signed up within the last 12 months, roughly, you will actually, you get Volunteers for Salesforce now as part of your nonprofit starter pack install. If you are using an earlier version of the nonprofit starter pack, or you have actually upgraded from version 2 to version 3, then you can go and find Volunteers as a standalone app on the App Exchange. It's a free app and free to use, but as Kalman is saying, there are actually quite a lot of steps to setting it up, particularly the sign up. So it will take you some time and resources to get going, just because there's a lot to do. Yeah, and actually that leads to an interesting question, Dennis. Yes. How long does it take? Go ahead. Sorry, Paige.
I was just going to say, I think if you're going to set up the sites and have the personal sites for volunteers to be able to log in, and the one for the volunteer form, the application form, and things like that, that's probably some of the most time-consuming, especially if you're not used to working in those sections of Salesforce.
So yeah, so Dennis had that question, which, how long does it take to set up? Any hours or days, he says. Any suggestion? It can take both.
I would say if you're Paige or Aidan Martin, I know he's on the call, you're a whiz at this, and they're probably like whipping through it. But if you were, or any other consultant, I'm sure Ashima also can do it pretty quickly. If you're a Salesforce end user or a Salesforce admin, I would say give yourself 2 full days to set it up in the sandbox, and 1 day test it, get everything working, and make sure the hardest thing I would say is from a workflow perspective is the emails, making sure when somebody signs up they're only getting 1 email, or if they, the reminders, things like that. So that's where after you get the actual configuration set up, it's going to take a little while, but it's going to take some time to do the workflow and go through all your user stories or use cases that you might actually have with your volunteers signing up. That's what I've seen, at least.
That's great. So I wonder if these are quite general questions. We do have some beginners on the call. Shall we sort of talk through some of the bits of the app? I can show an instance that's got it. It is a performing arts organization, but it's one of the most complete ones. Or if any of you have organizations that you would like to show, I think it might be useful to just, for those who haven't really seen it before, to have a dig in. Should we talk a little bit about how it works internally in Salesforce first? Would anyone like to talk a little bit about campaigns and jobs and shifts? And if you want me to show something, just say.
Yeah, so campaigns are kind of at the heart of how volunteers are managed. This app utilizes a campaign object, and it has a hierarchy of campaigns with projects being at the top, and under that is jobs, and under that is shifts. And so for some people, they get a little bit hung up on this terminology, because it may not be the terminology you use within your own org. But think of projects as sort of being an overall organizer for a type of. So let's say it's an event, right? So an event can be a project. So you have your gala coming up, and you have all kinds of different volunteer jobs at that gala. So you'd set up and the great thing is that there is a wizard, as you see up there, the volunteers wizard, that walks you through setting up this kind of hierarchy. So you'd set up that project for the gala, and then under it you'd start to put all the different jobs that you need people. So you need people at the check-in table, you need people for setup, you need people for cleanup, right? And then if those jobs have one or more shifts, i.e. like you have someone at the check-in table for the first hour and a half, and then you have a second shift coming for the next hour and a half, then you would set those up. And volunteers can either sign up at the shift level, or you can sign them up at the shift level or the job level. The project level is meant to be more of just kind of a parent to all of that, to be able to categorize one particular event or kind of grouping of volunteer jobs.
So there is this, yes, I think that's the thing everywhere. There's the very useful volunteer hours object, isn't there, Paige, which is what links these things together. It links the people
Yes.
to these jobs and shifts.
Yes. So, and that's another one I just saw a post the other day. Like, I don't see the volunteer shifts on a volunteers page. It's because volunteer hours is the connector object between volunteer shifts and the contact record, right? Or the volunteer job and the contact record. And that's where you're capturing signups, and then whether or not they actually came and completed their service on that day. So that's kind of where the roll-ups that are on the contact page about volunteer hours and things, they draw from this volunteer hours object.
Yes, in fact, let's go back to this person, and yes, here is her volunteer information, and because she has a number of volunteer hours which are completed, I hope everyone can see this as I'm doing it, these roll up to be the, where are we? There, to the total hours. Yeah, I was explaining this to somebody yesterday about this whole move through the status, isn't there? Because on the volunteer hours, there are various different statuses. Kalman, could you speak a little bit to that, about this how you sort of progress from like the sign up to being confirmed, etc.?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
I
Meaning,
was wondering if, well, it doesn't have to be, yeah, but this whole idea of how somebody goes through various
oh,
stages in a way,
right.
you know, because if they sign up for a job, they're not going to come straight in as confirmed, are they? Unless you adapt the app.
Correct. Unless you, yeah, I think generally people are using that standard. I mean, I think what I've seen is people have been asking, taking a step back. Even people should not be able to sign up; they should have to apply. So the volunteer sign up will come in and send an email saying thanks for submitting your application, and then once they internally select on the contact record and say that they've been approved or active, then they'll send, or then you can trigger the email to be sent when they're active. Hey, volunteer, click on here for your personal site link. And then when they go ahead and sign up, um, and again, I think the majority of what I've seen has been, that's the first stage of people that people want. They don't want to make them active right away. And then the second thing would be once they sign up for a job. I mean, are you allowing them to sign up as confirmed, or is it going to be, they need to be vetted internally again? So if they need to be vetted internally again, you have somebody, the task will go out to those internal staff, and it will say this person just signed up, and then they'll go either confirm or deny it. Is that what you were getting at?
Yes, absolutely. Sorry, I was just going through and muting a few people because I was sorry about that background noise, Kalman, and I'm kind of assuming it wasn't you. So yes, just if there's anybody I've missed on the list, if you're not muted, please would you mute yourself, because there are a lot of people on the call now, and helps our presenters. Yes, let's dig into this a little bit actually, and Paige and Ashima, please join in, because I think this is actually what you say. There is a source of confusion here, and it's something that, or certainly it's something that I've found with my clients, is this confusion between the initial sign up, as you say, the sort of registering your interest, and then how you sign up for it to do a specific piece of volunteering. So let's talk a little bit about that, because there are kind of the app provides two different processes in a way, doesn't it? And different ways to sign up between this initial, I'd just love to volunteer for you, and the, oh, here's a specific thing that I would like to volunteer for.
Right, and I know many organizations have a whole process for volunteers who are applying, so they might start with filling out the volunteer application, and then maybe they need to attend an orientation before they can start volunteering, or they need to do some training before they can start volunteering in particular positions. So those are the kinds of things that you can use, declarative customization to capture in the system. So you can see that they've applied, and then track that they've done these necessary steps before they actually can be an active volunteer who's allowed to sign up for things.
Yeah, and sorry, the screen's just gone. I was just looking to see if for this organization if I could find their sign-up page. But this is great, Paige. Keep talking.
Yeah, so I've seen, and even with background checks, you could capture that in a number of different ways to make sure that they've completed the steps in the process, and where they are with it. And you can even set up things like automation, a workflow, or the like, to if they've applied but haven't yet attended an orientation, you could set up a time-based workflow to say 30 days after they applied, maybe if they haven't completed the orientation, it would send them something saying the next step in the process is, coming to our orientation, and here's, the upcoming orientation dates, or whatever you wanted to do. The great thing is that this package comes with a fair amount of automation built in, and you just need to customize the templates and things. But the goal is to free up, your volunteer manager or coordinator from having to send out a bunch of individual emails about the same thing, and let the system do it for you.
So actually, yeah, I have now found an example. This is for this this is a little complete. They've added quite a lot of additional forms, but but actually everything that's in this volunteer registration form here, from the name down, and I mean, basically, I think that probably the first few fields are pretty standard. Volunteer availability and volunteer skills come with the package, and then they've added some additional information, and all of this is feeding directly into their Salesforce instance, and ends up on the contact record. So yeah, this is their initial form, with the idea that then somebody has to be approved by their volunteer manager before they'll actually let them sign up for a shift. Do you have something similar, Kalman? Do you have this same idea that you have a kind of public registration form, as it were, and then
Yep.
and then you sort of make the process more controlled?
Yeah, exactly. There's an organization that I do some pro bono work with here in Boulder or in Denver, um, and they have a pretty unique flow, but they have some really, I mean, like any organization, they have some specific criteria that they want from people. So they have basically the standard form here, which is amazing. I'd say the only drawback to this form, as is out of the box, it's not responsive. Um, that's that's something that's come up several times in the hub, and it's just not responsive. The code is not there, which you can make those changes, but that takes a little bit more effort. But yeah, they'll sign up, and then internal staff will go through those steps, similar to what Paige was saying. Depending on what the need is, they'll call the people, the volunteer manager, um, or send them documentation that they need to sign. We get signatures. If they're working with children, of course, it's a whole different ball of wax. People on the call that work with children or volunteering that may come in contact with kids know that it's a whole different layer. And then once they're approved, I think Paige talked to that as well, then send them some more emails, automation, sending them the next steps, attending trainings, things like that. And then again, once they're in, then they can click a link on which we haven't got to yet, but the link right there, that's your volunteer information, which is an amazing, anybody who knows the security of Salesforce, this is a great workaround for letting unauthenticated people see Salesforce data, which is awesome. And then they'll be exposed to this link right here, or this link to add in first name, last name, and email. Then they'll get their information. But again, that would be behind your personal website, so that might be an authenticated area, or maybe it's not publicly available, and they just send the link to people. So there's various things that I've seen organizations do to keep it more secure.
No, of course, you don't have to, do you? I'll think for a moment if I can find an example. I mean, you can also publicly list your jobs, which is great as well. There's some question. There was a question which I think, Paige, you've actually answered, but let's talk about it for everybody. The question was about campaign hierarchy, and did volunteer jobs and shifts and number of volunteers, do they roll up to the parent? And
yes, they do. And
yeah, she doesn't answer that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'll just look and see if I can find.
If you go to a volunteer project, you'll see.
Yeah.
If you have those fields on the page.
Let's have a look and see. Broadcast presentations. I'm not sure whether
that's a job. Yeah. It's at the. Yeah,
so there's a campaign. Yeah, I'm not sure whether this lot have set up, but we'll try it.
Oh wait,
volunteers.
It was right there. So if you look under volunteers, so see the volunteer section, and so it shows you how many volunteers are still needed, the number of volunteers in there, the completed hours, how many volunteer jobs are under that project, and then how many volunteer shifts.
Yeah, but that one I think is directly in the parent campaign. I'm not sure. I think the question may have been more about hierarchy, and I'm not sure that this is set up necessarily to show the hierarchy. So can you do it with Can you do it with campaign hierarchy as well?
I know that's a good question. I don't know.
You could
Yeah,
in a report.
I didn't think that those fields would actually add up all the children. So, but again, I haven't played with hierarchy, so I don't, I mean, I played with hierarchy in the sense of what Saigal provides, but I don't know if volunteers still need it. Is showing us if it's a parent, all of the children, and that's the part I don't know. I've never actually done that. I wouldn't think it does, but maybe it does.
Well, because volunteer projects, you can't actually specify like how many, I don't think you can specify how many people are needed, right? I think that's more at the job and shift level.
Correct.
Yep, job and
Yep.
shift.
Yep.
Yeah, so that is on the project level a roll-up from the jobs and shifts.
Right, but then would it go rolling it up to the parent?
Oh, a parent
the jobs
of the
and shifts.
project?
Yeah, the jobs and shifts are not on the parent; they're on the children.
The jobs and the shifts are on the children.
Well, the project is what I consider the parent.
So yeah, in a hierarchy,
Maybe
you
we're
can have children. So if you're talking about projects, you can have child sub-projects within a main project.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm not sure there. You probably would have to use a tool like declarative lookup, roll-up summaries or something like that.
And a report. I mean, it's quite easy to build reports that show both child and parent campaigns. I think the place where that whole parent campaign thing, though, is very useful is on the calendaring, because you can show parent campaigns as well as child campaigns. So you can limit your events by campaign. And I think it's right that if you include the parent campaign, because I think this is something that David included recently, that you can show all the jobs right the way down. Looks like this isn't working that way, but never mind. I thought that was one of the features that you could include. Maybe it's on the sign-ups. You can include jobs in the children as well as the parents.
Yeah, on the calendar on the website, you can show the parent and then all of the children. So you could say, like, because you can actually, on the calendar, you can specify which campaign you want to show, and it will only show that campaign and all the children. So if you're like, maybe you want a page that's like, these are all of our water events and that you can volunteer for anything related to water. And then you can have a campaign in Salesforce, and all the children can be literally all volunteered gigs that are water related. And that way you can have a page just on your website that just shows those. If like you were trying to aim people at certain types of volunteering.
And if you guys notice on this calendar, it's color-coded, and that you can assign different colors to different, is it at the job level that they get assigned? Or is that the project level? Anyway, so it makes it easy for volunteers to look at the calendar, and even for your staff to look at the calendar and see, what types of volunteer opportunities are being offered where on the calendar. So I think that's a nice feature.
And if you set up the right parameter, you can see how many people are confirmed for the shift or how many
still needed,
and you can show that out on your web listing as well. Let's talk a little bit about the emails as well, because there are quite a lot of useful workflow rules and email templates and things in the app as well. I think kind of does a lot of the work for you. Sorry.
And I was just going to say, and also the field sets in order to, most applications, or sorry, most public-facing visual force pages, which if you don't know, that's just the custom sites from Salesforce. If you would like to make changes to most visual force pages, you'd have to code it, right? You'd have to hard code it and go into the code and make changes. This is using field sets, so basically you can take groups of fields, and you have in your controllers in the back end of the page, more the development end, it's accessing these specific field labels here. So the volunteer sign up FS, which means field set, and you'll know that what that means after you read the documentation. But these are customizable. So if you have, very likely you have custom questions that you want to ask people when they're signing up that are custom fields on the contact record, then you can add those. And like, for example, are you CPR certified? If it's clearly not a standard Salesforce field, so you can create the field, add it to the field set, and the code is looking for whatever's inside that field set to display it, which is pretty remarkable when it comes to, I just need to make a change to my application.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think it even goes as far as there's this Find Volunteers tool, and you can specify what criteria it's looking for and what's displayed. It's just awesome.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Absolutely. So yes, let me show the work. Where are we? Let's do the workflow rules. Volunteers. So, anybody just want to comment a little bit on what's included here that helps you with using the app?
Yeah, so there's some nice workflows that are included with the app that help to manage the app. So things like, for that first one, volunteer hours, set the end date. So if you don't, usually you put in the start date, and many times it's just you have a one-day kind of job, right? So if you don't fill in an end date, it will automatically put the same date as the start date, meaning it's a one-day job. So it kind of helps, because it's important that the end date gets filled out for other reasons, but the system will do it for you if you don't do it. Let's see that second one, volunteer hours. Sorry, it's so small I can barely read that one.
Yeah, it's very similar actually, isn't it? That second
okay.
About doing a similar work. Yeah.
The list view, I think there should be some more. I think just the list view if you have the all workflow rules, but there might be a volunteer list view.
All should cover all.
Sorry, I was trying to. Come on, go bigger. My window. Anyway, sorry, Carrie. This maybe GoToMeeting is not letting me Zoom. I'm trying to make my window a little bigger. But anyway, sorry, there are some custom rules in here, but these are the ones that I was trying to hide some of the custom rules.
Okay.
I think the email ones are quite interesting. The notifications, do you use any of those, or have you used those?
I mean, I personally like getting internal staff involved. So, internal staff, you can, with your workflows, somebody signs up, and if it's a new volunteer, and you can send it out to basically a queue, anybody who volunteer manager or multiple people, and then they can call them or email them right away. I love the instant response or gratification. You sign up on someone's website, within 5 minutes, you're receiving a phone call from the volunteer manager, which is pretty amazing. I love getting people involved like that, but also the reminders I think are great. People who sign up and just having those really simple templates that say, hey, Joe, your shift is tomorrow at noon. Just making sure you're coming. Or even which is not in the package, but there's a thank you for volunteering, but after an event is over, you can send an email out to people, or after they sign in and add hours for a shift. There's
I think the email ones that are kind of confirming the various steps of the process, like, yes, we received your application, and we'll be back in touch with you, and thanks for signing up for the job, and then the reminder of the job, all of that, is I think what volunteers expect these days, as they should, and it's great that the system just does it automatically, and you can customize the templates, however you want, so that they look like your org and read like your org. So
Yeah, and like for us, it just made no sense. PTA, there's no one that's going to call anybody to remind them or to say welcome. So we actually just had everything very automated and reminding them, you know, like, hey, you signed up, thank you. 3 days before the actual job, it reminded them, 24 hours before. So we had reminders going out pretty frequently. We had our logo on it. It looked like it was coming from our volunteer email address. So when they responded, it went to that address that someone checked. So if someone said, oh, I can't make it, I forgot about that, it automatically sent it to that email address, and the person could remove them from the volunteer jobs, especially because on our website it actually showed how many openings there were. And if someone said they couldn't do it, then that opening would be available again and someone else could sign up.
Yeah, and it's interesting, isn't it? If you use the personal sites feature, people can actually cancel themselves, can't they? They have the option.
Yep.
Yeah, I'd have to dig around a little bit to find an example of a personal site. I'll have a look in a minute, unless one of the rest of you has one. Chris has a question here asking about how things are mapped over to both leads and contacts. I have
Caroline, I was going to suggest there's some really good videos that you can watch that walk you through like personal sites, and I can post that so that folks can look at it.
I haven't seen those.
Yeah, so if you scroll down, he actually has one for personal sites where he demos that.
Yes, I've used that a lot.
Me too. So I think these are really helpful videos. They're really short, and you don't have to, 8, 4, 5 minutes isn't that long, but it gives you a taste.
Yeah. Well, I think, a general tip is before you sit down and, definitely you can install the app and start with that part of it, but before you really go too much further in the configuration is to have a clear plan and a map out of the process that you want to have followed. So volunteer applies, then what happens, right? And then, we have a new volunteer job, what happens from there? And when a volunteer signs up for a job, what do we want to have happen? So before you really get into configuring, that you have a really clear, well laid out plan of exactly what you want the system to do. And then you'll find, probably a lot of it exists just out of the box within Volunteers for Salesforce, but some is stuff that you may need to then look at customizing yourself and starting to plan that out. But I think it's backing up a step and making sure you have a really clear, well thought out plan is really important.
Yeah, I would echo that because, sometimes there's unknowns that you don't really know, but that's why I really stress the testing in the sandbox environment. And the hardest thing that I've seen with people going live with this is, they go live and there's things they didn't necessarily understand or didn't know, and volunteers are getting duplicate emails, or there's a couple workflows that are, sending off an email at this point and then another point, and the volunteers maybe getting confused. So really testing it, like Paige said, figuring out your process. And that could be really as simple as, it doesn't have to be a very intricate process diagram. It can be really simple. Who signs up, what needs to happen, and then the next steps. I'm glad to show my screen for an example if you want. I mean, there's some things that I think are important to point out as well. I love the application. I think number one for me is the responsiveness of the pages, but also even like the volunteer jobs. If inside of Salesforce,
I've sent you a
oh, cool.
Yeah, an invitation to be the presenter. That'd be great. Thank you, Kalman.
Sorry, 1 second. Let me log in. So there's some basic information which gets displayed. Let me find a volunteer job.
And to the question that Deborah had, and I know about a plan, and Ashima, thank you for jumping onto that in chat. Yeah, I don't think even you, Paige, you weren't necessarily expecting people to come up with some really fancy diagram. It's more, I think, isn't it? It's just organizing these steps, isn't it? And just thinking about, how do we want to acknowledge that somebody's registered? How do we want to make it so they can then sign up for a shift? Do we want that public? It's more, and how much information do we want to capture along the way, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think, sitting down with a group of people that are, kind of involved in the aspects of volunteer management and talking it through, because most of us have a pretty decent plan in our head of how our process works, unless, for some it's much more complex than others, but there may just be some nuances that in talking it through with others and in sort of just putting it pen to paper to capture it that you may not have thought of. And, this may open up some thoughts of how you could improve upon the process you have currently. Because your time is going to be freed up from having to do a lot of, sort of the manual work that you used to. So, what would it be great to add to it that would add to the volunteer experience?
Okay.
Can you all see this? This is my job.
Yes. Could you make the job full screen though, because it's even tinier, I think, than mine.
Okay. Actually, I'm going to do this one. This is a better one. How's that? I'm having screen issues too, but okay. So here's
That's good.
Here's a volunteer job. So the description, this is an important thing. When you're looking at your website, what's going to be visible? Of course, display on website, which controls which job, and then there's the ongoing and inactive, which you can all find that out inside inside the documentation. But the brief description is basically everything that will be displayed. So if I go into the public site page, which we haven't looked at yet, but these are the actual jobs. So we have, here's a blog writer, here's a role description, the qualifications, etc. So you can't display other custom fields with the standard site template. And that means the coded page, as is in the package, you can't just say, okay, like we saw on the sign-up form, you for sure can add custom fields to the page, but when it comes to displaying the job, and I actually just asked this to the Volunteers for Salesforce group in the hub the other day. I mean, you'll see I ask questions all the time, and I consider myself pretty knowledgeable in the application, but certain things like this, which you can't extend it. So again, inside of Salesforce, this is the information, the brief description will be on the website. So whatever you want to provide to your people that are going to volunteer or sign up, then you need to make sure that you have this information here, right? So then when I go to the page, I can see it. And the same thing is going to be down here, where you can see this organization has, 4 hours a week. They have a lot of expectations from their people doing volunteering. But again, this is a very specific, they're getting volunteers to do project management work all over the world. Very, very small organization, but they're using Volunteers for Salesforce to get global signups, things like that. That's what I wanted to show there. Also, here's my reporting hours page. I'll just go to that. Here's my name, and then I can see volunteer jobs. And again, I can see my information. And this, you'll see some of the problems I have with the column. My name is quite long, so it wraps. You cannot make this wider, but you can ask custom questions here, right? But you can see how this goes down and down and down. So if I was designing this page, I'd probably, either open up a separate page here or wrap it, things like that. But this is standard out of the box, what you are going to see. And
that goes back to the field sets again, doesn't it? What's in that column is controlled by those field sets.
Correct. These are all the field sets where I can go down and even they have code of conduct links here, or confidentiality agreement, things like that. And of course, I haven't signed up, but I would see some totals. I don't have any metrics for this test org. But those are two things I wanted to say. I mean, they're not using any images. I'm sure other people may be on the call who are maybe have some more creative sites with an image, an image block, or maybe they've done a custom site.
Because certainly you can copy and in fact David encourages you to copy the template that he supplies, doesn't it, for the personal site, and then you can make modifications. So I think if you know a bit of CSS and HTML, it's not that difficult to sort of change the colors or add your logo or
correct.
Yeah.
But I think, and I mentioned this in chat and inside of the GoToMeeting chat, if you want to go, there's two trajectories. You can use the standard package and use all the elements, or you can go custom. If you go custom, like any application, you can get it on GitHub because it's available there, but you will not get any updates or bug fixes, etc., things like that. So it's something to take into consideration, because if there's a package fix, you will not get it if you create a custom site, for example. Good example of that is this is the job calendar. Some people don't want to use this. They may not have a calendar or a need to see things on the calendar. It might just be per job and not per time. But you can't really suppress this unless you have a custom sites page. That's just a couple things I wanted to say about.
And I wonder, one of the things that when you were talking a few minutes ago, Kalman, about that whole business of the description, one of the ways that I've got around it specifically for the shift description is to get the client to create a series of custom fields, which then there's a workflow rule that takes the information out of those custom fields and copies it into the description field. Because I agree with you, both job, it does seem to me a slight limitation that you have to get around with both job and shift, is that description is really the only field you've got to put the information.
Right.
So yes, you as I say, the way that I solved this problem was that I had the client basically fill in a series of kind of pick lists and custom fields. I made the description field read only, so that people couldn't actually put anything in description, but it's then just the what they put in those various pick lists. Then there's a workflow rule when the record's created or edited that just copies all the values over into the description field and creates the description. So that's
a good idea. I noticed the description field is a rich text, so if you wanted any formatting, you would just have to go back and
that's great.
You would have to do that afterwards, though.
It just be exactly. I think it's one of those things that if you have a lot of jobs and shifts and it's sort of the same things that you're putting in every time, then it can be a little boring if you always have to put it in description. And definitely cloning records is your friend with this, I think. There's a lot of cloning goes on when you set these things up.
But as with any cloning, and I keep meaning to write a blog post about the dangers of cloning,
Go for it.
You have to be super careful to check all the fields that need to be changed. I was just doing this on something internal, one of our processes, and realized I screwed it up because I forgot to change one field. So cloning, in theory, is great as long as you're really detail-oriented once you've cloned it to make sure that you've changed everything that needs to be changed. And I just wanted to
please go ahead.
One other tip, which is, and Kalman referred to it earlier, which is if you haven't already, join the Volunteers for Salesforce group in the Hub. It's a great place to, see what other people are grappling with. If you've got a particular question or something you're trying to figure out, I can guarantee there's somebody else who's grappled with it as well and probably has some suggestions for it. So I think that's a really great source of information that you should take advantage of.
Absolutely. What a great piece of information. And David Habib, the developer, is regularly in that group as well, and is answering, I think, as many questions as we do. Anything else? So I see there's a little bit of discussion going on about the personal site, and how you can change that. Michael had asked, if you create and use a custom site, does that make the whole package unmanaged? To which I think the answer is not necessarily. Does anyone else have any more quick questions? Yes, Dennis, assuming that Dennis has asked about the recording. Yes, assuming that it's worked okay, I will make it available.
Yeah, and just one more point about the personal site, just because this is something that I've been grappling with. So, for example, there was a feature request that I put in, and it was accepted in GitHub. One of it is, if I am a volunteer and I go to report hours, and there's a drop-down that says select the volunteer job. Currently, in all Volunteers for Salesforce packages, it'll show every single job in your Salesforce, in your organization, that's public. So that makes it a little bit tricky for reporting. People can mess up if people are prone to error, human error. So there is a bug fix that I put in, and it's basically going to render only the jobs that I'm signed up for, which is a pretty cool feature. I think it's going to help, at least if you have a lot of jobs. So if you did clone, this is for myself, really telling myself this, if you clone the sites page, you're not going to get that feature, so you will have to pull the code from GitHub to make the change. And again, those are development costs and fees that you have to think about in your organization. Or obviously, if you have those resources internally, like you can do that, but it would take a little bit more time to get those pages working correctly when new features come out.
And I think it's also worth saying that the report, you don't have to have a personal site to use the report hours. I think it does stand separately. It's with the personal sites, but you could also just embed that in your web page as a way of getting volunteers to report their hours. And of course, you can manage this internally as well. There's a little tool to help you do a mass update of volunteer hours once a shift is over, and also some tricks about how you can autocomplete using a workflow. Audrey, the reporting hours feature, I think, is in the first part of this video on David's site about the personal sites. He talks about the reporting hours feature first, and then moves on to the personal site. Okay, we have a minute left. Any other? And thank you, Stephen, for this idea about doing precisely what Kalman was just asking about, and the volunteer hours reporting. I think that makes it a very good point. As we've said, we've been demonstrating this amazing app that David wrote as entirely in his own time and maintains as a volunteer. If any of you feel inspired to write additions to the package or make bug fixes or whatever, David is always very grateful to review these. I know we've talked about the volunteer as the dynamic the responsiveness and dynamic, the views on mobile. I think David's very aware that this app doesn't look quite as good on devices as it should do. And if anyone wants to help him, then this is an open call to contribute. So on the subject of volunteering, thank you very much indeed to our volunteer panel today. And that is to Ashima and to Paige and to Kalman. Thank you very much for taking your time to share your enthusiasm and knowledge about the app. Yes, Stephen, you're quite right. You have to be a little bit careful about the contributions. I mean, please submit them to David, and he will review them and make sure he's only going to put them in the package, of course, if it doesn't, if they're applicable to everybody and they don't impact it. I think it was more to say, actually, he can't do all of these features on his own, and those who have the skills and time to help is great. So thank you very much again to the panel. Thank you all of you for your questions and for joining us. And we will be back with the regular office hours next Friday. I look forward to seeing you all on a session again soon. So thank you very much, everybody, and have a great weekend.
Thanks for
You
hosting,
too.
Caroline.
Take
Bye,
care,
guys.
everyone.
Thank you much.
Bye.
See you in the hub.